Well, I think that it is on. Call the December 3rd study session to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could I have roll call, please?
Councilpersons Breeding.
Present.
Higgins.
Here.
Kelsey.
Here.
Parkinson.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Salcido.
Here.
And Mayor Carnes.
Here. Purpose of this meeting was study session to discuss the findings from the Joint Criminal Justice Center preliminary study, which was conducted by Redstone Architects. And we're going to start off with Redstone Architects. We have Daniel with us. So, Daniel, it's all yours.
Thank you. You have, as I understand it, Mr. Koppler has passed out the full report to you, and tonight we're presenting a summary PowerPoint presentation to give you an overview, snapshot of what we did. So the objectives, there were three objectives. The first was to develop a space needs assessment for the Lincoln Park Police Department. The building is old, it's overcrowded, there's a lot of issues with it, and in order to look at the future, we need to know what is required for a new facility. The second was to update the space needs assessment that was done in 2015, and that was to do an update for the new 25th District Court. And then the third is to develop determine the feasibility of putting both the police and the courts together and develop a justice center. And this was done under a grant received by the city from the state of Michigan. So there are 8 bullets here, and these are really just dividers. The first was team meetings and end-user interviews, and I just want to say that throughout the whole process, we were engaged in the late spring, and we finished in November. Throughout the whole process, it was a thoroughly collaborative effort by our staff, by the city working group, and by the executive committee of the 25th District Court. So the group included the people you see, and that's in the report. And the asterisk names also are the Lincoln Park Working Group. So we had some additional people on the executive committee, Larry Steckelberg from the state of Michigan, who helped with the grant, Richard Marsh, the city administrator from the city of Ecorse, and Michael Balder, the mayor of city of River Rouge. And of course, Chief Waters here and Deputy Chief Lavis and Matt were involved throughout the process, as well as both judges. Judge Clifton is here tonight, and Terry Michael, the court clerk. So in terms of the police department, we met with both the chief, the deputy chief, various department heads. We identified the obvious negatives to the building and to the facility and how it's overcrowded and not safe. And throughout the whole process, whether it's court or police, we worry about security of the officers, the people, the staff, the public, and the people who are incarcerated or temporarily being held. We did the same with the 25th District Court, and also a very active group and a lot of discussions. They have a real space crunch because they have no space for the people coming in, and the calls could be up to 200 a day, waiting for to appear before the judge. The lobby is inadequate. The security is inadequate. Both prisoners are walked from the police department over to the court. There are no sally ports, detention areas. It's very congested. And this year, the state of Michigan introduced a new rule that's going to require more space, and that is that indigent defendants be allowed, must talk to an attorney before turning them down and going before the judge themselves. So the program development, and we have a pretty thorough, in the report, pretty thorough program development for both the police department and the district court. I'm just putting the summary up on the board. We determined for the police department that a new building would require approximately 42,500 square feet, and we've allocated space in there. We haven't allocated any money yet, but we've allocated space in there for a potential communications dispatch center because there's been a lot of talk in Lincoln Park about having your own dispatching, and that may be with or without other neighboring communities. And that totals about 1,800 plus gross up, maybe 2,100 square feet, 2,200 square feet that's in this program should you decide to have a communications facility. The court, and we're showing you both the 2016 study that was done by National Center for State Courts and the 2018 updated that we did. I think the big difference is the fact that we added a third courtroom because of the projected activity and the possible additional consolidation of another court coming into the 25th District Court. So how do we determine what fits, what doesn't fit? And we start that by block diagrams. We're trying to share space, have collaborative spaces that are used by both the court and the police department, such as the lockup, so that when you're brought in from the county jail or from a neighboring police department to go to court, you go into one detention area and then you go to court. Or if the Lincoln Park Police arrest someone, they go into that detention area and stay there. And that's a shared space, and it has to be secure, and we try to minimize any kind of security breaches or confrontations between crossing with prisoners over the staff space. And the benefits of the shared facility are single site development, which help reduce the cost. Sharing in the construction costs also help. You have one exterior wall, one roof. Shared public parking is a big thing where we can, the police can use, the public can use the parking for both court and police. A secure perimeter. We don't have to create multiple security setbacks because we have one, and of course sharing of the lockup. So the first floor, and this is how we develop the site, what do we need, and then we'll look at the sites in a little bit. The main area is the holding area that connects from the one sally port, which is where the police bring their prisoners in, into a holding area, staff entry. We have a major facade, which the public will approach the building, one for the court and one for police. We try to keep the two entries separate just because police are independent of the courts, and the courts are the keeper of freedom, and everybody looks to the courts as an independent body. You have blown up 11 by 17s there, and if you have any questions later, we can talk about the adjacencies and the relationships. But this was gone over a number of times by the users of the police department and the courts, and I think we've worked out a good concept. The second floor doesn't have to be as big as the first floor. Most of it is either the courtrooms or the police administrative staff commons, detectives, and so on, and the communication space. Site fit. So now we have a block diagram that's about 40,000 square feet per floor. And how do we analyze the sites that might be available? The first thing we have to do is determine what sites are potential and what size they are, and then look at the options. So we did a little study for the building for the police department and for the court, and we rounded it off. Police and court each require about 4 acres if they were separate, and driveways and entryways and landscaping and so on, another acre or two. So we said if we can find a site that's 9 to 10 acres, we'll have a good chance to look at it and see how well it works out. And there are other issues when it comes to site location. One is it accessible to the public? Is it on a bus route? Is it going to enhance the community? A new Justice Center with this kind of square footage is a major investment, and does that really spur future growth and adjacent growth by the private sector? So we looked at, after looking at a whole bunch of sites, and the chief drove our team around early on to identify different parcels. We identified the Sears site as the initial, the empty part of the Sears site, and as one major potential site. And then we looked at the park next door. We sort of glanced at it and said, boy, that might be nice also, but we put it in the back of our minds. And then we looked at the Vibra Hospital site, which we understand may be closing soon and may be available. And that is on a major thoroughfare. It also has some decent adjacencies. And we looked at all three sites, and again, you have larger drawings in front of you. The Sears site and the Quant Park site both are similar in size, and we've done pros and cons on all of those sites. I just want to go to the, as you can see, between Sears and Quant, the building on the park would be closer to Dick's and a little more prominent. All the public parking is in front on both solutions or both options, and the secure parking and the impound is in the rear, in the secure area. So those two sites at least are good test fits. The Vibra Hospital also is a reasonably good test fit with public parking off of Outer Drive, the secure parking and the impound towards the creek. So then we get into budgeting. And budgeting is always the big number. How much is this going to cost us and how do we pay for it? Before you know how to pay for it, you got to figure out what it's going to cost. We have been working in the city of Lansing for both the district court as well as Ingham County and the Lansing Police Department for a new court on the Ingham County Court, the Veterans Memorial Courthouse site in Lansing, which has their circuit court. And so we have really up-to-date numbers from Granger Construction as to the cost of construction for both police and for district courts. And these are Lansing numbers. They were adjusted slightly. And these were 2019 bid projections. So if we were working on drawings now and went out for bid in the spring, these would be the numbers, almost $30 million if you had a combined facility. And that's only for the hard and soft costs, and there's 23% in here for soft costs. Those are fees, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, technology, security, all the things that go into a building after you put it up. It does not include land acquisition, land improvement, such as demolition if you had to demolish something. Those are not included. If we go out to mid-2020, and obviously we get to how do you pay for it, it was acknowledged early on that whether it be Lincoln Park or Ecorse or River Rouge, even for the court portions, likely would be need for a bond issue or going to the voters for some sort of millage to help pay for it. And so we projected out to a 2020 bid projection, assuming that there would be a bond issue or some vote in November of 2019. And that would give us, and how do you get to 2019? But that adds about 5% to the cost. Inflation and construction costs have been going up at least that. The Detroit area has been very hot in terms of costs. There may be a little slowing down now, but that's a reasonable number to project. We also looked at possible differences of delivery methods. The tried and true, the old-fashioned way is the general contractor. You hire, go out for bids, put a set of documents together, go out for bids, hire one general contractor. He's responsible, or she or it is responsible, then single source. You take their subcontractors, try to screen them, but you're really dealing with just one general. There's the CM as agent, construction manager as agent, which started in the 70s. It's very popular. You could end up with 20 to 30 contracts that the city would have with all the subcontractors. That's sort of being phased out, and the construction manager at risk has come in. And that is where you engage a construction manager at risk. Everything gets bid, gets assigned to that construction manager. At some point late in the design phase or at the bid phase, or maybe even before, they will give the city a guaranteed maximum price, which includes some contingency, and they are responsible for delivering that project at that price. Any money under would go back to the construction, to the city. You also have the possibility of design build. We just finished the Battle Creek Police Department, and that where the city of Battle Creek engaged a contractor, Schweitzer Construction, to do a design build, and I was the architect, and I ended up having my contract assigned or developed through Schweitzer Construction. So I did not have a direct contract with the city, but that's another way to do it. And then there's the integrated delivery project, which I don't know a lot about, but it's similar to construction manager at risk, where you bring everybody on board as soon as you can. Even with the construction manager at risk, we would want them on board during our early design phases so they could help us with budgeting, they could help us with selection of materials, systems, and so on. So we get the expertise from the construction side as we're doing design. So my first vote is CMR. I like it. We've done a number of public projects with it, and it works. We then presented the study to the executive committee, trying to get a site consensus. The interesting discussions were really all about money. You have 3 communities sharing a court, and they have formulas for how they get assessed to pay for their share of the court costs, court operating costs. You have the city of Lincoln Park that also wants to do a police facility, and so that is not really part of court, except maybe the shared spaces are, or there's some of the shared systems. So you have to develop some sort of allocation plan, and we're way too premature to have done that. But that is for the capital costs. How do you allocate once you come to an agreement that you're going to work together? And then the second item that we kept discussing was, how much do we have to pay? You've got, again, the 3 communities. Everybody's worried about how it's going to impact their budget. I'm sure you're worried about how it's going to impact your budget. But if you have a new building, then you have the annual operating costs of that new building. And that has to be worked out into a formula that's agreeable to all 3 communities if you're going to continue to have a shared 25th District Court that is a new facility. So that was really what we've done probably for the last month of the process, sitting there, talking, discussing, weighing the options. And of course, I don't have the answers to a lot of the questions that are raised. I can help as we move forward. What did I do with, what happened to the schedule? Okay, thank you. So we developed a consensus for the site, and that was Quant Park. There were rumors floating around over the last month that obviously there's different ownership of the empty part of the Sears site, plus the Sears building itself, which is another ownership, and it seemed difficult to try to wade into those waters. The discussion of the park was simply that it needs some improvement. There are other locations that money could be spent to develop a a new upgraded recreation facility, and that because it was a park, the development cost would not be excessive for the building, and maybe the cost of a new park on another location could be incorporated into the whatever bond issue you would be proposing to the citizens of Lincoln Park. So it sort of made sense that the city could get a new building and a new park facility as part of this project. The schedule, and this, I put the schedule in, and you have the whole executive summary. You have, I just copied the bottom part. I didn't copy the top part. The first thing is property acquisition. Well, you can't buy property or acquire it until you've decided where you want to put the new facility. Then you have to work out the details, and if it's going to be with the school district across the street, or it's going to be with the city Parks and Rec or the community, you have to figure out, will this go or not go? The other is funding for the project. We felt that the numbers we've put down in this preliminary budget are very ballparky, just to give you an idea of the arena that we're in. To really get a good handle before you go to the voters, we'd like to go through schematic design and engage the CMR to come on board to help with the cost numbers, so that we have a good number that you can rely on when you go to the voters and say, this is what we need. We're not going to have to come back to you. We can feel confident that we've got a good projection. And so that would require engaging the design team, developing the design effort, and by August of 2019, have that done so that we could go put wording to the county clerk on the ballot for the November election. I mean, it works back from November of 19. Now, we could obviously go to November 20 or May 20 if a special election, or August, but the consensus was both the court and the police department really need new facilities. How can we get them their new facilities in a fairly efficient way? And every year you wait, you're talking another 4 or 5%. So it's not, these are all really things that you, as the leaders of the elected officials of the community, have to figure out and work with the citizens to resolve. And we're here to help you, to collaborate with you, to offer our advice. And the next steps really are yours to determine. So I'm here for questions, and I'll try to.
Well, before we
Yeah.
go questions here, I'm thinking of having Judge Clifton weigh in on that, and then we'll leave the last half hour for questions and discussions here. So, Your Honor?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Clerk, Mr. Koppler. So this, journey began back in 2015-16 with the court securing a grant from the National Judicial Center to conduct a preliminary study of the court only. That report in 2016 demonstrated significant issues with the court as it relates to the space for the court and staff, as well as, in particular, the public. The physical condition of the building itself is a big issue with ongoing maintenance issues. Can't wait for this winter for some more flooding. Parking is frankly an embarrassment, and security and safety is an extreme concern for the court. Following that 2016 report, I appeared before Mayor and Council in all three funding units and secured permission to move forward with efforts to develop a new court building, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Because of the financial climate at the time, it was not appropriate to try to do anything immediately. At this point, though, we think, and we earlier this year decided it was time to begin to move forward, and discussions also took place about including a new police building as part of the project, which is absolutely a necessity if you've ever been in the police department. They're in a similar state as the court. I, again, invite anyone that wishes to look at our building to come over. Thanks to Mr. Koppler, we were able to secure another grant. And by the way, the first study was paid for by a grant by the National Judicial Center. Mr. Koppler was very beneficial in getting another grant to retain Redstone to prepare the updated study to address the needs of the court and police. And I want to recognize Redstone for the outstanding effort they did in spending time with both the court and police to do that, and the study that they've put together. We're also at that stage, as indicated, to select a proposed location for the building, court and police. After much consideration, the court highly favors the Quant Park location, with the express understanding that any such proposal would include a new updated park for the citizens of Lincoln Park. I think it's a excellent opportunity to get essentially a brand-new park with a lot of technological innovations. I strongly believe that a court police building at the Quant Park would also provide a fantastic gateway into Lincoln Park. Imagine citizens coming down Southfield and they see that structure, or coming down Dix. It would be just a very visual attraction to the entrance of Lincoln Park. Also, I think that development would encourage continued development at the existing Sears site, and encourage somebody to come in and do something really beneficial with that remaining property. I think the Quant Park location also fairly serves the residents of Ecorse and River Rouge, which the 25th District Court also serves. The travel time for that location would be significantly less than the current location. In terms of financing of the court building, as indicated by Mr. Redstone, that would be the responsibility of all three funding units, dependent on their particular shares. I will mention that the court has already collected more than $1 million in a building fund that we started with your approval some time ago, and we continue to and plan to build on that, so that can be put forward toward the cost of this building. So no question in my mind that this is a very important project, not only for the citizens of Lincoln Park, but I think it can be a beneficial one as well for the aesthetics of Lincoln Park. So I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, we'll bring Daniel back up, and we'll open it up for questions.
I guess I'll start, through the chair if I could.
Go ahead, sir.
Looking at the project, it's almost like everything that we have in the city is going to be consolidated in one area. The property thing for the police department will be from DPS down there. In other words, it looks like the wish list, and I don't mean that way, but the wish list got everything all at one time into this particular building. And the same thing with the court. I mean, they got an extra magistrate's office in case they need one. They're going from 65, actually from 2016 to 2018, all the square footage doubled almost with the court. In 2 years, it doubled. Could you explain that to me, why it doubled from 2016? Now, the indigent thing is still kind of like up and up and that, and I understand that'll probably still be done, but we went from the square footage almost got doubled. So I'm kind of looking, I mean, I have no problem with, everything is obsolete. I understand all that stuff. I know when the court got all three together, they just did it, and everybody got stuck with what you got, okay? And I know everything you're saying, but I'm looking at the figure staggering, and I'm looking at the fact that we're doing everything at one time, which is good, but we're shoving everything in here. I mean, everything we got spread out in the city, you know, the police department's spread out because of what we got. The court's gonna have more space and obviously futuristic space because we're gonna put another magistrate in there. And I'm just wondering, what changed from 2016 to 18?
It's a very good question, Larry, and let me address it in this fashion. I think the 2016 study was a glimpse in a period of time. At that point, what was the need of the court? And they didn't really take a look into the future projections. For example, the 2016 study recommended just the continuation of 2 courtrooms. I can tell you from 4 years of experience, 2 courtrooms is insufficient. We desperately need a magistrate to assist with some of the matters that we address on a daily basis. There, you know, and right now, even if we wanted to have a magistrate, there is no room to put that person. Judge Zelnick and myself were basically there from 8:30 to 4:30. Rarely get time for lunch. We're just continuing to do things all day long. And so a magistrate is necessary to better serve the public and keep things moving. There's just no question that we need that. Another part of the component that required additional room is, as mentioned by Mr. Redstone, the state of Michigan has come forward with this requirement, a legal requirement, that effectively the first of the year, every court in the state of Michigan now has to provide an attorney for every single person at their court appearance if they wish. If Donald Trump walked into the 25th District Court on a misdemeanor charge, he could say, I want a free attorney. That's the way that law reads. And to that end, part of that law also requires room for the attorneys to have confidential conversations with those individuals. And as indicated, we probably have in excess of 200 people a day coming in. So we need room for court-appointed attorneys. We need room for retained attorneys. We need room for prosecutors to meet with these individuals. We have none of that now. The 2016 study really did not adequately address that. In fact, it was not an issue in 2016. Did you want to add?
I'd like to add a couple things. First, the 2016 report did not do block diagrams or identify multi-story facilities. It just did square footage. So we're dealing with 2 courtrooms. We now have 3. They had a magistrate's facility, so do we. We have a second floor lobby area in front of the 2 courtrooms. We have a first floor courtroom area, all of which need lobby space and waiting space for the people who are going to appear in court. We have exit stairs, so every building needs fire exiting. And so that's 400 square feet per floor, per stair, 2 stairs, you're at 1,600 net square feet. So the building support space from 2016 went from 3,000 to where we have 6,600, 6,700. The courtroom is a little bigger because in the 25th District Court, you have a more active courtroom and requires people to wait either in the courtroom or in the lobby area. You need the indigent defense office space so that everybody can have their attorney without being recorded to let those defendants make a decision. So I think we were much more thorough. I work with NCSC and Cheng-Ming Ye and the people there are great. I don't know the extent and the assignment that they had. I just had their report, but we got into a lot more depth and a lot more understanding of how you operate as the 25th District Court.
Thank you. I would just, that was one of my questions, because looking at, and again, it won't be done until we're done. There's no set hard figure, like you say, those are ballpark figures. They're not even close to what we're gonna probably run into when we do it. That doesn't include all the soft costs, basically. The other thing is that this looks like it's gonna be built for the future, at least 5 to 10 years out after we build it. In other words, I'm looking at all the ports and the Sally and the videos and the conference rooms, individual clerk. I mean, you're really building this out, so hopefully, if it's built out one way, we shouldn't have to add anything. There shouldn't be overcrowding in 5 years from now, where we have to turn around and redo a brand-new building, which happens a lot sometimes in the construction industry. That's what I'm looking at. Have you looked at the other cities? I mean, Allen Park just did one over there in it's a smaller venue. How did they get away with doing, that was a police department, but they still have the same court right next door. I don't think, and I've never been there, thank goodness. I don't like to visit that place, but how did they get away with all that stuff? I mean, it's the same court physically, it's still situated, it hasn't moved any, and then the police, not addresses the police department, but the police department looks even smaller because it's part of a shopping mall. That's why I'm asking the question, and I think you answered most of it when you said most of it had to go. When you did the 2 floors, you got to have more because of elevators for one thing. That's another added cost that you have to have, and the separate stairways and all that stuff. And the fact that, like the judge was saying, you got to have a magistrate. I thought we had a magistrate though. Did we have 3 judges at one time in that small one?
About
Or no?
4.5 years ago, I was the magistrate.
Oh, okay.
But I was only working part-time 1 day a week, and that was, at that time,
okay.
Judge Chungan was still doing, holding court in E-course, and that allowed me to
I
use
gotcha.
one of the courtrooms. Now, we don't have the ability
Gotcha.
to do that. And to address the question about Allen Park really hasn't changed. It's still one city.
Yeah.
What's changed here is that we have 3 cities that are served by a court that was built for one city. And our caseload is dramatically more than Allen Park, and it continues to rise. So, those are, and the other, and the point you made too, Mr. Kelsey, which I think is a very valid one, we want to build a court that is good for the next, not 5 to 10 years, 20 to 25 years. We don't want to have to come back in 10 years and say, well, we're running short of space, we need to do something, because that's a lot more expensive than doing it right the first time.
I agree. I think that, I guess, if nobody else has got, I got to, sorry? Go ahead. I'm done. Go ahead, I'll wait till everybody, go ahead.
Just for a point of information from someone who been here a while, Quant Park, if it is no longer used for park purposes, it reverts back to the Quant family. It's in the deed. So I don't know if all of you are aware of that or not, but it reverts back to the Quant.
So I have the deed,
You have the deed.
yes, and that actually was acquired back, I can't remember what the year is now, but it was acquired by the city from the state of Michigan.
Right.
And the restriction on city use was for a short period of time.
Well, because many years ago, a developer came and he wanted
Yep.
to use Quant Park and find a different location, and it could not go through. It was a legal opinion. We could not proceed with it. The developer could not because of that right of revert.
That doesn't exist.
Okay. Okay.
Through the chair.
Are you set?
I guess so.
Okay, yes, sir, go ahead.
You were saying $30 million for this project?
Yes, sir.
Is that $30 million just for Lincoln Park or $30 million split between the 3 communities?
Well, that depends on how we develop the formula and allocate the cost for the capital costs. Again, the 30 million includes the 20, you were mentioning hard and soft costs. It includes soft costs. So the construction cost is down in the low to mid-20s for construction, and then you've got the, let's say, 23 million or 24 million and 6 million for, or 25 million and 20% for soft cost would be 30. The court is going to have X percent of the total facility. Let's say it's based on the numbers that we had in here. Let's say it's, I think they're about equal, really. 50%. So that 50% has to be allocated, and if it is 50%, because they're sharing part of the police department, assume it's 50%. The court will have to then, we will have to allocate, and the cities will have to agree as to what proportion of that 50% is Lincoln Parks, E-courses, and River Rouges. The 50% that's the police department is going to be Lincoln Parks. Now, part of that, again, is going to be shared by the court, so there's a small percentage of square footage that's going to be allocated. But the parking, the court requires more parking, so we might get into some analysis that takes the various systems and starts allocating based on use, and we'll have a capital cost allocation, which we'll sit down. Well, I'm sure representatives from all three communities will be involved, as well as the city officials, and you'll have to negotiate. But it will be shared by the three communities.
Thank you.
And one more point, with the way Judge Clifton is planning this, the use of the third courtroom right now would be for a magistrate, but in the future, if another jurisdiction joined, you'd have a fourth entity that would be sharing in those costs, potentially.
And that's an excellent point that, again, going back into our development and planning of this, we could not, in fairness to our community, we could not discount the possibility that at some point in the future, the state of Michigan might add another community to our court. For those of you that remember, in 2012, 13, the state of Michigan fairly arbitrarily said, we're going to add E-course and River Rouge to Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park really didn't have much to say about that. At some point in the future, they could just as easily say, we're going to add Allen Park, we're going to add Melvindale, we're going to add Southgate. These are all communities, adjacent to Lincoln Park that would be quite easy to add in. And if that's the case, now we need to add another judge for sure, and we would have a courtroom ready to go, and then we would put the magistrate, if we still had one, we have an area set aside that we could move the magistrate to. So we've sort of planned that into the overall structure. One other thing I wanted to come back to on Mr. Kelsey's point about the police towing, by combining all this together, really you're going to get a much better economy of scale. You're going to put everything in one location. It's going to be a lot more efficient. The police can oversee the tow yard. You're not going to be paying another company to do it. So I think that brings a big economy to scale too.
Yes, good.
So all three communities would have to approve this as far as the financing of it? All three would have to have a special election?
So there's two parts to the project, if you will, the court side and the police side. The police side, because it's Lincoln Park, would be subject to the mayor and council of Lincoln Park approving. The court side, because all three communities are obligated to contribute to the funding of that, we would have to go before all three mayor and council to get their ultimate approval.
Wait, clarification. The police department, you're talking about floating bonds. So that would not go to the voters of Lincoln Park?
For the court side?
For the police?
No, I'm not addressing how you would finance it. I'm just saying who would be
Oh, it
financially
wouldn't affect
responsible.
them on their ballot? Okay,
Right,
gotcha.
yeah, they would not, and in fact, it is our hope that the court side of the project would essentially be funded through the revenue that we take in, through all three cities and other, people that come before the court. Like I said, we've already set aside over $1 million in a building fund, and over the next year, it's anticipated, it'll be close to double that.
Okay, somebody?
Yes, through the
Yes,
chair.
go ahead.
Excuse me. First off, comment and a couple questions. First off, I understand the need for a new police building. Parking is bad, courthouse is old. I hear those stories all the time. So in regards to a park, you say you want to maybe enhance another area park to have a sports complex? Have you thought about what area that would be in? And how much retail space would be left if this building is put up right there on Dixon Southfield?
Well, if we utilize the Quant Park space, the benefit, the great benefit of that is we don't touch any of the existing retail space. It's left open for future development. And again, I think having a court and police, brand-new structure there is really gonna enhance the opportunity to do that. In terms of a new park, no, there's not been a particular location selected. I would imagine that would be within your folks' ambit. But I think the benefit is you could add like a splash park for the kids that we don't have now. You could add, just more technology, a skateboard park. There's things that we could consider that aren't out there now because you're doing it, brand new.
And if I could interrupt on that, I think I would recommend if council, mayor and council saw that this was a good idea in terms of the development of Quant Park, that I would recommend we put together some type of committee and make it up of the different sporting groups that utilize Quant Park, as well as other residents, and have them take a look at that, because I think there's two ways to go with this. There's one, there may be some potential sites where we could develop new facilities, or would it be better to look at, the parks we have and use that money to update the facilities we have? And I think that would be a good, community collaborative effort to really look at and see which is the best way to go. So I think, rather than start talking right now and making decisions on that part, that we would want to engage the residents and the different users to see what would be the best way to go.
Yes, go ahead.
When we talk about the soft costs, you already have a figure for that too.
Yes.
Does that include energy efficient products?
Energy efficient products are part of the hard cost of construction. So we would be designing to whatever level of green, if you want to be, off the grid, you can get there. It's expensive. You can do a lot of most buildings today are 95% energy efficient with the systems we have. It's getting to that extra 5% or 10%, whatever it is, that you have to weigh the cost-benefit ratio. But yes, we design the buildings to be energy efficient. Those are really in the hard costs.
Anything else, Councilman? Councilman Higgins, do you have?
I have a
Weigh
question,
in.
and it's a follow-up for what you said before. And it's my understanding, and I may be wrong, that the courts were added on to because of population. Is that correct? And if that is true, could they not, the state also come in at one point and say they're going to break the court up into a less populated area?
I think one thing, nobody has a guarantee on anything, Mr. Higgins, but one thing I could say is there's almost no chance they're going to make courts smaller. It's the movement is toward regionalization, similar to the dispatching, to try to make it more cost efficient by adding multiple cities into one dispatch. I think the movement is toward, and in fact, if you look back the last 10 years, you could probably identify numerous courts throughout the state of Michigan where they've consolidated courts to create that efficiency of operation. For example, in 2011, 2012, there were 4 judges serving these 3 communities. Now there are 2 judges. So the state of Michigan saved itself a lot of money by not having to pay those judge salaries. The communities arguably save some money by not having to maintain courthouses in those 2 locations. Unfortunately, the result is that Lincoln Park has, borne the brunt of that, cost of maintaining one courthouse, and the public has, I think, unfortunately, suffered as a result. So, if anything, the state of Michigan is going to continue to consolidate and look for opportunities to combine courts in contiguous cities.
Okay. Is there anything else from council? Would like to save
I'd
the
like
last
to-
5 minutes or so to open it up for public comment.
That's fine. I just have one quick question.
Right, sir.
The state, the indigent fund, isn't there a thing that the state, when they give unfunded mandates, that they have to pay for those? And that's basically an unfunded mandate. I'm not a smart politician, but I've been around a little bit, and I think the state was called to the carpet on that through the legal system once before, where they mandated the communities to do things and never put the funding, and that was deemed to be illegal. So is there any discussion with the court, up on the higher court, to say, when you're doing this stuff, aren't you guys supposed to be paying something for that?
Well, part of the,
I mean, not much, but something.
part of the positive on the existing indigency plan is that the state of Michigan is funding that entire thing for the state of Michigan. I think the budget outlay this year is like $86 million. So the cost of the additional attorneys, the cost of additional like computer equipment, that sort of thing is being borne by the state. It's not going to be cost any of the funding units $1.
Except for the space,
Except for the space, the bricks and mortar.
which is expensive according to the square footage cost.
Well,
I'm not trying to,
I see your
I just
point.
ask, yeah. I just ask, I was just curious. And my last real quickly, because have you decided, or have you discussed as a group, what's gonna happen to all these vacant buildings? You're gonna have a court that's vacant on some prime property, you're gonna have a police department that's vacant, actually obsolete. You're gonna have some other properties, maybe the CPW building is gonna be obsolete. Have you discussed as a group what you could possibly do? Obviously you discussed about another park, maybe, taking Quant Park. Have you discussed what would happen, or what you could present to the council for your ideas on those properties?
Besides the new city hall? No, I'm just-
Well, yeah, we'll build that
That was meant to
instead
be
of the
a
court.
joke. I think Matt wanted to
Those-
answer that.
Those, fortunately or unfortunately, how you want to look at that, those are our buildings, so we would have to make those determinations.
So that answers my question.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was really outside the scope of this study.
No, but I was just thinking, when I take a used car and turn it in, I usually get a price when I buy that new car, and it depends upon, that's why I was asking the question, because they still have to, like the city manager, we still have to maintain them, still have to make sure they're not gonna go away. Plus, we're gonna pay for it, the citizens are gonna pay for a new one. So it's kinda like a new, what do you call it, playground or whatever we do. Thank you, I'm all set, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, is there anyone from the audience who would like to be heard?
Good evening, Joyce Murray, resident. So I know it's small because we have to think about priorities, and this is obviously a priority. We need to update some buildings. But if I recall, just a few months ago, we got a grant for Quant Park to put some lighting in. I feel like if this was an option, council should have been involved in kind of looking at those options, because we may not have used the funding at Quant Park. We could have used it at another park, because now, are we going to waste the money that was used? Are we going to reutilize the lighting that they put up? Things like that. So that's part of like the miscommunication between committees and projects and who's doing what. So we need to be more cohesive, I think. Also, a question, maybe you can answer, because we're combining police and the courts. Did the fire department, do they need a new building? Was that considered to consolidate them as well? Or even City Hall, because there's been talk about we need a new City Hall. So could all those be combined into one to kind of cut down on costs, or rebuild City Hall on where the police and court were, because now those will be empty vacant buildings? So just a few questions, I guess.
I think from, the priority standpoint, we knew that the court and the police department are the top building priorities that we have. I think the limitation in plans and planning is the ability to pay for what you're planning to do. I don't know necessarily if the city or the residents are prepared to do a project of that scope to include city hall or fire departments. I think, right now the fire department is in pretty good shape. so we don't have a lot of building issues there. I think, although it's not ideal for the way that the services are provided here at City Hall, as it's laid out, I think that with a little bit of a reinvestment, we can maintain for a period of years here, so we don't have to spend a lot of money in building a new facility. And again, just looking at the cost of these, you could easily be talking about another $7 million to build a city hall. And I think priority-wise, that's not the top of the list of what we need to be doing.
Okay, is there anything else from the audience?
Evening, Mayor and Council, Clifford Eberts, resident and taxpayer. I look at this as a win-win for the city because if you think about it, a newer building, more efficient to house the courts, as Judge Clifton said, and I'm sure Chief Waters would agree that the police department now is just too small. So a newer facility, having it all under one roof, is a win-win for the city because with more energy efficient lighting, a newer building, and everything under one, we can recoup the costs down the line. So it will actually benefit the city cost-wise, and we will see major benefits from it financially over the future years. And with the older buildings, what we can do, we could easily renovate them or search out for tenants that want to occupy those buildings and use them for a financial purpose and put them back on the tax rolls and then give them the opportunity to go through the building department and renovate them as they see such fit for their needs. So I look at this as a much needed thing for the police department, for the courts, and I see it as a financial beneficiary for the city because we'll recoup costs. These older energy, inefficient buildings are being like an albatross, just dragging the city down financially. So one building, a new complex, could actually save the city millions of dollars in energy costs and other things, and that can go back towards the general fund, or the money we save could also go back to the police department and the court system to, add more, financial things that we'll need for like updated police vehicles, hiring more cops eventually, just giving them what they need and giving the city what they need to become a first-class city with updated buildings and such. So I see this as a very positive, very a good thing for the city. And I think no matter what, we should go forward with it. The cost, it's going to be a little bit, but, sometimes you have to give a little to get a lot. So I see it as a much needed addition to the city. And we can always find ways with the money savings to put it to use in the city as far as bringing things back. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thanks to Daniel and Redstone Architects for their presentation tonight, Judge Clifton. And being no further discussion on this, we'll adjourn this at 6:59.
But first, you're going to order here and then you're going to